There's a corner of your bathroom you already know about. Behind the shampoo bottles, maybe. Along the grout line where the wall meets the tub. The ceiling above the shower where the paint looks a little soft, a little dark. You scrub it. It comes back. You use the spray with the sharp chemical smell, the one that costs $9 and leaves your eyes watering. It comes back. You caulk over it. It comes back, pushing through the new caulk within a season, patient as water, finding its level. My name is Takeshi Mori. I'm Japanese. I grew up in the countryside of Niigata Prefecture, in a house my great-grandfather built with his own hands. That house stood through 140 winters. Not one wall lost to mold, no bleach, no orange spray. No contractor with a truck and an invoice. $2. One item already in most kitchens. The method my grandmother used without thinking, because no one had yet told her to forget it. Stay with me. The bathroom fan does one thing only, and that one thing is lie to you. Not maliciously. It runs, it hums, it sounds like work. You step out of the shower, press the button, hear the hum, and feel like you have handled the problem. The noise alone feels like resolution. I understand that feeling. I had it myself for years before a very old builder in my village, a man who had drywalled and plastered and repaired more houses than I have had cold winters, sat me down and asked me where exactly my fan was mounted relative to my shower head. I told him. He looked at me the way a man looks at someone who has been carrying water in a basket. Here is what most people do not know. The modern bathroom exhaust fan, in the overwhelming majority of homes built in the last 50 years, is mounted in the ceiling near the door, not above the shower, not at the source of the steam, near the door, the driest point in the room. It pulls air from the driest part of the bathroom, processes it briefly, and exhausts it outside. The wet corner behind the shampoo, the cold upper wall, the ceiling directly above where the hot water hits your shoulders, the fan barely grazes those surfaces. I want you to hold a question in the back of your mind, and I will come back to it. If the fan runs every single day, why does the corner that never gets direct light never fully dry? Hold that. I will show you the answer. And when I do, the whole problem will make a different kind of sense. The mold you see is not the problem. Hear me on this. The black line in the grout, the pink stain at the base of the tub surround, the gray creep along the sealant. That is the announcement of the problem. The problem began days before you noticed it, in water you cannot see, on a surface you probably never touch, in the hours after midnight when the bathroom is dark and still, and the cold wall is doing something you were never told it does. My grandmother did not fight mold. That is the thing the city people have never understood about the old ways. She did not fight it. She stopped the condition that allows it. Those are two completely different battles. One costs $9 a bottle and never ends. The other costs almost nothing. It takes about 15 minutes to set up and works while you sleep. I will show you which surfaces are actually feeding the mold, what is happening on them in measurable physical terms, and why the tool you were sold to solve this problem was never designed to solve the actual problem at all. But first, hold that question. The fan runs every day. The corner never dries. Why? Now let me give you the answer, and let me give it to you the way my old builder friend gave it to me. Not as a folk saying, but as physics, stated plainly. The steam rises. The cold wall drinks it. My grandmother said this to me when I was 9 years old, watching her wipe the window ledge after an evening bath. I thought it was a proverb. It is not a proverb. It is a description of condensation, stated by a woman who left school at 14 and understood buildings better than most engineers I have read. Here is what is happening in your bathroom in terms a building scientist would recognize and confirm. When hot shower water meets the cooler air of the room, it evaporates into water vapor and rises. That vapor travels until it contacts a surface cold enough to trigger what engineers call the dew point, the temperature at which airborne vapor converts back to liquid water on contact with a solid. In a typical bathroom during cooler months, the tile on an outside-facing wall can hold a surface temperature of 58 to 62 degrees Fahrenheit, even while the air near the shower head reads 80 degrees or warmer. When that warm, saturated air meets a 60-degree tile surface, condensation forms in seconds. Not steam, liquid, a thin, nearly invisible film of actual water, sitting on a cold surface in the dark. That film is what mold feeds on. The spores are already present in every home, floating in ordinary air, completely harmless until they find a wet surface and enough time to root. Researchers at the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, doing work funded by the U.S. Department of Energy, found that mold growth activates when surface moisture lingers above 70% relative humidity for 6 or more consecutive hours. Not days, 6 hours, the length of one night's sleep. Now here's the answer to the question I asked you to hold. Your fan is mounted near the door. It pulls air from the driest part of the room. When it runs during your shower, it moves saturated air across saturated walls. The vapor pressure differential between the moving air and the wet surface is nearly zero, meaning the air has no capacity to absorb additional moisture from the wall because it is already full of moisture itself. The fan hums and the cold wall stays wet. A study published by Building Science Corporation in 2019 found that the typical post-shower fan run time in residential bathrooms is 8 to 12 minutes, enough to reduce odor. Not enough to dry a cold wall, which can retain surface condensation for 45 minutes to over an hour after the shower ends. So the fan runs every day. The wall stays wet for 6 hours every night. The mold comes back every time. That is not a mystery. That is geometry and thermodynamics. My grandmother did not have a word for either one. She had something more useful. She knew where the cold wall was, and she knew what to put there. Coarse, natural salt. The kind used in pickling, in preserving, in the old household work that has been done in Japanese kitchens for as long as anyone in my village can remember. A shallow ceramic dish, the kind sitting unused in the back of most kitchen cabinets right now. Fill the dish with 100 grams of coarse salt, which is roughly half a cup, and place it in the wet corner of your bathroom, not the middle of the room, not on the vanity shelf, in the corner where the wall meets the tub, or on the floor of the shower stall if you have one, near the outside-facing wall. Salt is hygroscopic. That is the technical word for what my grandmother knew without needing a word for it. It draws moisture from the surrounding air and holds it within its own crystalline structure. A dish of coarse salt placed at the point of highest condensation will absorb ambient moisture continuously and passively, with no electricity, no filter to replace, no service contract. A study published in the journal Building and Environment in 2021 measured passive desiccant materials in bathroom environments and found that even low-cost hygroscopic materials reduced average surface relative humidity by 8 to 14% over a 6-hour overnight period in a closed bathroom. 8 to 14%, enough to bring a 74% humidity reading, the threshold at which mold roots. Down below the activation point, $2 for a bag of pickling salt. A dish you already own. Set it in the corner. That is step 1. Step 2 is the thing I told you everyone is doing wrong, and now that you understand why, the correction will make immediate sense. Do not run your bathroom fan during the shower. Run it after, starting 10 minutes after you finish, for a minimum of 45 minutes. During the shower, the air is so saturated that the fan cannot meaningfully dry any surface. It only moves wet air around. After the shower, as the steam dissipates and the air begins to equalize, the fan becomes genuinely useful. It now has drier air to work with and can begin pulling the residual moisture off the cold walls before the 6-hour clock runs out. A mechanical outlet timer from any hardware store costs about $4 and can be set to run the fan on a delay automatically. The Building Science Corporation study found that delayed post-shower ventilation reduced average bathroom surface moisture retention by 30% compared to concurrent ventilation. 30% from changing when you run a machine you already own. Step 3 requires nothing you do not already have. Once a week, on the outside facing wall and on the ceiling directly above the shower head, take a dry cotton cloth and wipe the surface down, not to clean it. To break the moisture film manually before it reaches the 6-hour mark. Dry cloth, cold wall, one slow pass. My grandmother did this every evening with a rag she kept on a hook behind the door. She did not call it mold prevention. She called it keeping the house in order. The answer had been sitting in the kitchen pantry the whole time. Salt, a dish, a timer, a cloth. The most expensive item in this list is the outlet. Timer. $4. Now I want to tell you why you were never told this, and I want to be honest about what the answer actually is, because it is not complicated and it is not a scandal. It is just arithmetic. When the people of my grandmother's generation kept a house, they kept it with what they owned and with knowledge passed down at no cost from the person before them. The salt came from the kitchen. The cloth came from the rag pile. The understanding of where the cold wall was and what it did in the night. That came from a mother to a daughter, without a transaction, without a margin, without a customer who needed to return next month. Then the cities grew, not in one wave, but slowly, the way a river shifts its bank over decades, a little at a time. One generation moved away for work. The next was born in an apartment building with tile grout and a ceiling fan, and the quiet implication that the modern building had already solved the moisture problem. No one was deceiving anyone, exactly. The architects believed their fans were adequate. The contractors installed what the building codes required. The building codes were written by people whose professional world was organized around products and systems that could be sold, installed, inspected, and replaced on a schedule. And then the products arrived. Mold-killing sprays, grout sealers with antimicrobial coatings, bathroom fan units with built-in humidity sensors, whole-home dehumidification systems sold to people who live in ordinary houses with ordinary moisture problems. Each product targets the mold you can see, the surface colony, the announced problem, while the condensation on the cold outside wall continues every night, untouched, producing the next generation of spores on the same 6-hour cycle. The spray kills what is already there. It cannot prevent what is forming right now in the dark. On the surface, the fan never reaches, but it runs out, so you buy another bottle. The grout sealer degrades, so you reseal. That is not a coincidence. That is simply how a market works when it is organized around the symptom rather than the cause. I looked at the figures for bathroom mold remediation products in the United States. The market segment was valued at over $2 billion in 2023, and it is growing. Every year, more products, more formulations, more spray bottles with sharper smelling chemicals, and the same cold wall in the same corner, running wet for the same 6 hours, every night, in homes across the country. There is no money in coarse pickling salt sitting in a ceramic dish. Nobody ships that to a fulfillment center at a markup. Nobody earns a commission on a cotton rag. The outlet timer is a one-time purchase with no refill. The knowledge that makes it work was free to begin with, passed from person to person at kitchen tables and in tiled bathrooms in old houses that are still standing. That is why no advertisement ever showed you a dish of salt. That is why no contractor mentioned the delayed fan method. The free version of the solution is very quiet. The expensive version has always been very loud. Let me be direct with you now because I owe you the limits as much as I owe you the method. The salt, the timed fan, the dry cloth, these work on condensation. That is the root cause of most recurring bathroom mold in homes with cold walls and inadequate ventilation timing. If you use this method consistently, you are addressing the problem at the point where it actually begins. But if you already have mold established deep in the body of your grout, not sitting on the surface, but rooted into the material itself, you have a different problem before you have a prevention problem. You need to remove and replace the affected grout, or treat the existing colony with a genuine antifungal product first, before the prevention method can do its work. I will not tell you a dish of salt clears an established colony. It does not. It stops the next one from forming. In a bathroom with no window and no functioning exhaust fan, the passive method alone may not hold in very humid climates. A small electric desiccant dehumidifier, not the large compressor type, the small desiccant unit, costs roughly $20 and draws very little power. It works alongside the salt rather than replacing it. I give you this option because honest is more useful than impressive. Here's the whole system, short enough to carry in your pocket. Coarse salt in a ceramic dish, placed in the wet corner, renewed when it cakes in clumps, roughly once a month. Bathroom fan run on a delay, starting after the shower ends, for 45 minutes minimum. Dry cloth on the cold outside wall and ceiling, once a week, to break the film before the 6-hour mark. Or regrout anything already black at the root before you begin. That is everything. The house does not forget what you ignore. Only the people living in it do. Next time, I am going to show you the old method for keeping a wood floor from warping and splitting through a humid summer. The one my teacher used on a farmhouse floor that has held flat through 80 years without a single board replaced or refinished. One ingredient from the kitchen, 2 applications a year. No one sells it because no one needs to. Until then, go look at that corner behind the shampoo bottles. You know which one. Now you know what is happening there. And now you know how to stop it.